Welcome to the Women in Fishing Podcast. I'm Chris Woodward. The Women in Fishing Podcast is sponsored by AkzoNobel Yacht Coatings, makers of Interlux and all grip products for boats. Today, I want to talk about getting started in fly fishing. And my guests are Polly Dean. And after growing up in South Florida and graduating from University of Georgia, go Dogs, Polly began a 25-year career as a graphic artist at Game and Fish magazines in Marietta, Georgia. That's where she further developed her fishing skills, especially fly fishing. Today, she freelances for outdoor publications and even started a digital magazine called ontheflysouth.com with another longtime Georgia writer and editor, Jimmy Jacobs. And Lorianne Murphy is our second guest. Lorianne was the first woman to become an Orvis endorsed guide. In 1989, she helped start Orvis's women's fly fishing schools in 1994. Her company, Reel Women Fly Adventures, was the first to start fly fishing travel for women in fresh and salt water. Lorianne lives in San Pedro, Belize, and she has a fly shop and guide service called Reel Belize. Welcome, Polly and Lorianne. What credentials there?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes.
I'm going to take advantage of your credentials a little bit because our listeners out there, many of our listeners might be women who love to fish like me, who've maybe dabbled a little bit in fly fishing, but, really mostly done spin or bait cast stuff. And I want more fly fishing. I really do. And I'm trying to discover new ways to really get involved in fly fishing. So I'm gonna take a lot of what you say to heart, and I'm gonna use it personally. So this will be directly affecting my fishing life. So, but first, let me talk to y'all about who you are and a little bit about your fishing experience and what species you guys like to target. Polly, would you like to go ahead and start on that?
Well, first of all, I am always asked what's my favorite species, what I like to target. And honestly, I don't have one. I just love going to new places. Anywhere I haven't been before, it's exciting to me. And I don't care if it's another town in Georgia or South Georgia, whatever, getting in the car and go. And then the species is the same. It's just something. I mean, it's more exciting to catch a species that is new to me. Yeah. So that is just always, I like to mix it up and I like the variety.
Do you prefer fresh or salt or no preference?
I do not. Well, I do not. I grew up in South Florida, so I am a beach person. I like the salt. I like the beach. So and then getting older, like we were talking about earlier, the flies are a little bit larger in salt water. So I do like that. But honestly, it is, I just love mixing it up. I like anywhere that fly fishing takes me.
Yeah, and I've seen Polly on the road many, many times, and she definitely is an adaptive angler and goes, and just does whatever's there, which is great because you feel like you can really literally go anywhere and do any kind of fishing, and that's
yes,
awesome.
And
that's very freeing.
Thank you, Chris.
Lorianne, how about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your fishing experiences and what species you like to target.
Well, thank you, Chris. I think for me, the last 30 years, I've been a fishing guide, so fly fishing guide. I started in Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, rowing a drift boat, teaching, and then I was able to experience the saltwater when I was in Florida Keys, and that was super fun. And then we did our Reel Women trips, our Reel Women fly fishing adventure trips. Took us a long time ago. We started fishing the Bahamas and all around. And then, so I've always had this salt thing. And then I ended up moving here, and now, I live the dream. So it's, I started a fishing guide here. They never have seen a woman pull a boat before. So that was interesting for them. And now we actually have young women coming up and doing that. So that's really fun. But, so me as a fly fishing guide and transitioning out of being a fly fishing guide has been a really big part of my life right now. I fished all over the world. I've been very, very fortunate. And I have to say, I got kind of snobbish about trout there for a bit. And now I've such a fragile habitat. I love bass. They're so fun. Smallmouth bass, so much fun. Oh man. But you can't beat a tarpon on the end of your line going up in the air. And for the fish, the light tackle experience, you just can't beat a tarpon.
Yeah.
But then this last summer, when I was traveling around in my camper and whatnot, and for our trips, and I was in the backcountry of Wyoming, and just seeing a beautiful fine spotted Snake River cutthroat in all its colors come up to the surface in slow motion and eat my hopper was amazing. And so I think to Polly's point, when you're out there, you're doing it, you're having fun. And that's what it's about. It's about getting out there and yeah.
Great. Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to ask about, or the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about, is the fact that fly fishing really does seem to attract a lot of women. I've been doing, as I've mentioned, more conventional style fishing for most of my life. When I look at statistics and when I see photos, I see a whole lot more women in fly fishing than in conventional fishing. Do either of you have a read on why that is? Polly, do you have a feeling for why a lot of women are into fly fishing?
I can't say I know why there's more women in it. I think women in general are getting more into fishing, fly fishing. I see more and more women's fly fishing clubs. But I do know that when I was learning to fly fish, and I still do, that I hear from an experienced instructor or just another fly fisherman that women are easier to teach. It is more a sport of finesse, technique. It's not strength. So they like instructing women. Women are receptive to it. And if they're like me, they just enjoy going to beautiful places. Anyway, that's I just think women are naturally good at it. So that may be it.
Lorianne, especially since you have a shop and you run a guide service.
We started, Real Women Fly Fishing Adventures in 1994 for the point that, I would see women and the guy would book the trip and then the gal would be in the back of the boat. I'll just read my book. And then when we started the schools, literally when we were doing it in Manchester, there were husbands in the bushes going, "No, honey, you're doing it all wrong." It's like, so it to be able to have now, we have an explosion of women in fly fishing. I would say it's an explosion. It's the fastest part of the fly fishing market. Why? Women are just doing stuff anyway, like they're bike riding, they're horseback riding, women are getting out there. Women are just saying, you know what, it's really important for me to, and we've all gone through a whole lot in the last few years. And so you see a rise in this, need for passion, need for, identity, need for bonding with nature. And on the other hand, Polly, to your point, I know all the guys say that, oh, we love women, but women can be, I've had, some super strong women in my life, like Martha Stewart and different people, strong personalities that are where you'd be like, it's nice to see. And the wonderful thing that's happening is women, like on our Real Women Fly Fishing trips, and we have a Sisters on the Fly trip coming, 30 women coming in February. But what happens is camaraderie between the women. We started in 1994. We have so many of our friends have met each other and have been best friends for 25, 30 years. I mean, what an amazing thing. They met in Jackson Hole 30 years ago, and then they keep going to the Big Hole River. And I mean, just these great stories. And so that's what it's really about too.
Yeah.
May I add one short point about that? And it's to Lorianne's point about the wife sitting, the woman sitting in the back of the boat. I think many times maybe it doesn't occur to women that this is a sport they can do until they witness it, and then they're like, well, that
and I think
fun.
as the message has come out, Polly, that wow, it is inviting. You can be any age, any size, anything, just come out and make it happen. And so many wonderful things like Casting for Recovery now that's
Mhm.
exploded, and Wounded
Yeah.
Warriors and all these different special programs where I tell my clients when they come and I say, you'd be really good as an instructor. Oh, really? I don't know that much. I'm like, yeah, you would be, because that's how you find out about it. And I think, Chris, that fly fishing maybe was really intimidating at the beginning.
Yes.
Of course, experienced anglers like yourself, it's like, oh, that's another crowd. And, even at the big events would be the fly fishing and then tackle. And so, it's like, but that's really crossed over a lot. And because, like, let's take you, for example. If you were going to show up, you have all this amazing experience your whole life, and your powers of observation are very, very astute. So that makes you easy to teach because you just go, oh, okay. So it kind of transfers over, I think.
Well, I first I have to back up just a second. Did you just tell us you taught Martha Stewart to fly fish?
Well, I did actually. This was I had two. I've had some really great jobs. I worked with Meryl Streep for 4 months on the River Wild as the fly fishing technical advisor. My credit comes right after Maggie the dog.
Oh,
With Meryl and Kevin Bacon, and it was a fabulous job. And then 2 years after that, Martha Stewart said, we would like to do a story for Martha Stewart Living going into the backcountry of the Wind River Wilderness. Will you take us in? Okay, great. 17 entourage. And we were both alpha females, and we were like this. And anyway, there were so many long stories, but we ended up just having a fabulous time. This is the year before she went to Cupcake Prison.
oh gosh.
And but I just feel the world of her. We ended up a week camping in the wilderness, and we ended up having a really good time.
Yeah, you don't think much about Martha Stewart actually camping in the wilderness, but I guess
she was amazing, actually.
How about that?
Amazing. Yeah.
Does she still fly fish? Do you know?
I don't know, but I would like to see her again. And she really enjoyed it. Of course, she had people give her a lot of these, beautiful boxes of flies and everything, and I was like, okay, great, but that's not going to work here. So anyway, my guiding, I have had an extraordinary life as a guide, and I've been able to be with a lot of wonderful people, of all. So that's been the best part for me.
Great. Well, we could go on about that, but I want to address, or I want to ask about when women come to you and ask how to get started learning to fly fish, what do you recommend, Polly?
I would say, and I live in the Atlanta area, is to look for a club. And this may be more difficult, depends where you are, but it seems to be more and more fishing clubs. And we are fortunate we have one that's the women's fly fishers in the Atlanta area. Now, I happen to be a little intimidated with these women. They're pretty hardcore and they're pretty good. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm friends with many of them. But a fishing club, I think, is just the best way. And it could be men, women. We have the Atlanta Fly Fishing Club. I'm pretty active in it. And it's just a group, and they're very welcoming. To newcomers, they have casting classes, trips anywhere, saltwater, freshwater, whatever. So I think finding a club is the best thing.
Well, I think now too that COVID is finally waning.
Yeah.
We have more of an option for that, because to the point I made earlier about myself wanting to get more involved, I went to a local fly shop, the one fly shop we have in our small town, and they had a women's fly tying group or women's fly fishing group. And I said, I'd really like to get to know some of them. And they said, well, COVID, it's kind of a thing. So hopefully, as things progress, I'll be able to find that. But that indeed was one thing that I started to look into. Lorianne, what do you think?
Let me add a quick thing. An advantage for Atlanta Fly Fishing Club, they now Zoom the meetings in addition to the in-person meetings. So that's an advantage. And they still do, even though they
those
are
clubs in Atlanta are amazing. They're really, really great. They're really, really, and I totally agree with Polly. I mean, the resources now are just regional. You could just go local and find fly shops doing local classes. There's United Women on the Fly, which is another great resource for women, you know, wherever you are, and just finding out about other women guides and wanting to do that kind of thing. And then, you know, the women only trips. I mean, Real Women Fly Fishing Adventures, we were the sole gig forever. And now there are several companies that are doing women only fly fishing trips. And I think it's really great. I mean, you know, just, you know, that kind of support where you feel like you're in a safe place. And the demographic has changed so much lately. And I would say, especially after pandemic stuff, you know, really younger, you know, I would say 35 to 85 is the demographic. And so it's so fun because, you know, a trip of women and everybody's learning from one another, and you kind of get to just show up and be your fun self and then fly fish as well. So
Carly, let me ask, since you mentioned they do Zoom meetings, does that mean that people who don't live in Atlanta can join the group?
Absolutely. Yes.
All
and
right.
then that way you find out you're on the email
really
list.
good point. Yeah.
You find out when there's trips, and the trips could be saltwater. They could be, you know, in state. They could travel out of the country. So that's a good advantage to joining the club as well.
Okay, I want to ask about what some of the most challenging aspects are of learning to fly fish. For me, it's just getting the cast down, I think, and also learning about what fly to use. I think those are challenges that I need to learn more about. Do you guys have any feedback from other women that you know? Obviously, you're way beyond the beginner stage, but what do you think are the challenging things about it, Polly?
I think the most challenging for everybody, learning or a one that does it all the time, is finding the time and taking the time to do it. You just have to do that. And it's easy to not do that. It's an effort to take the time to go fishing. As far as the casting, I find there is help around in that area. So fly selection, I'm not the best of that, but I've learned that sometimes just having these wild and crazy, like electric chicken is my go-to, just out of pure ignorance, because I could be somewhere, the fish have seen everything in the world, and I throw them an electric chicken colored clouser and they go for it. And there's nothing that makes sense about it, but it's a confidence thing with me. So that's you know, there is no wrong way to do it. Just have fun.
Do you have tips on, like what you said at the very beginning, just making the decision to get out there and go? Because I know, it always seems a little easier to say, oh, you know, well, the weather's not great or this or that.
Right.
Do you have any like get up and go messages that you tell yourself? Or
that's where club trips, joining a club and having something on your calendar comes in and helps to plan. And honestly, and it could be just going to the Chattahoochee next Thursday, the second Thursday of the month, or something like that. That can just be helpful in committing. And again, that's a club that helps with that aspect.
Yeah. Lorianne, any suggestions on that front, or in terms of what the challenging aspects are?
Guide, we've always seen everybody, you know, when they show up, and when we teach women in women's guide schools and stuff, okay, you have 5 minutes to teach this non-angler how to fish before you go down the Snake River in Wyoming. What are you going to do? And so I've learned from the greatest. I mean, Joan Wolfe, Lefty Kreh, Mel Krieger, the Ray Jeff brothers. I mean, I was the new kid on the block 30 years ago. I was very, very lucky. When I teach casting right now, it is so simple. I don't use the word backcast. I use upcast. I say start with 10 and 2 is out the door. Nobody knows where 10 and 2 is in the whole wide world. I've had people take 10 and 2s on the ground. Nobody knows where 10 and 2 is. So, just understanding, flipping that rod tip up and getting that energy and flipping it out with direction, and just simplifying it, demystifying it, and then you start doing it and then you get confidence. Okay, wow, that was a good one. Or I caught a fish, or, yeah. And then with that confidence, it feels so good. And then you want to do that again because we need confidence.
Well, in terms of, and you're talking about fly or saltwater fly fishing with tarpon and stuff like that, obviously freshwater and saltwater fly fishing differ. Is it better to start with one or the other? How are the techniques and the gear different for freshwater and saltwater, Polly?
Okay, when I was first learning to cast, it was another friend at Game and Fish, Georgia Sportsman Magazine. He loved bone fishing, so his whole gear was teaching me distance and accuracy in preparation for bonefish. Now, in reality, I found out versus fishing in tight Georgia streams or saltwater, that it can be more challenging for me to fish the small Georgia trout streams with cover, rhododendron, and then having to be more accurate with where I place the fly. Where saltwater, it can require accuracy, but it can also mean blind casting in open water with no obstruction over you. So the most common, I'd say, difference between the two will be the wind. When you're fishing saltwater, you can pretty much count on windy conditions. So learning to double haul may be a definite advantage to more saltwater fishing. That took me a bit to learn, but actually Lefty Kreh, I was very lucky. I was at a show and Lefty Kreh, I was standing in the booth, and Lefty, if you've met Lefty, well, you have, Lorianne, he likes the women, and he came
loved
up.
Women. He used to just snuggle up, and then we would do the shows together. And so I would do a casting demonstration before his casting demonstration. And then afterwards, he goes, Lorianne, I can't teach this guy a thing. You get him. And then
I
take some gal over here in his arms and run away. But
he came and seeked me down in my booth. He said, I saw that man teaching you to double haul. I can teach an 11-year-old. I'm going to teach you. And I'm scared to death. He can't say no to Lefty Kreh. So he takes me in the back room.
Story, Polly. That's a great story. That is such a classic Lefty story.
He takes me. It was at the Atlanta Fly Fishing Show, behind the curtain, and it just shows me the exercise to practice, and it worked. I practiced it, but it's so funny because little kids come crawling in under the curtain, and he's, how Lefty is, he scram little kids, but anyway, I was scared to death, but I just couldn't.
What do you think, Lorianne, about the difference between freshwater and saltwater fly fishing techniques, and kind of, do you have a recommendation for?
Well, the big difference is in saltwater, it's all about hunting the fish. So hunting, waiting for a sighted fish, and then using your skill, be prepared to make it happen. So it's taking a lot of skill and concentrating it down. The same thing freshwater. You could say the same thing for a spring creek, in a presentation for a sipping fish or on the Henry's Fork. So when you like that kind of thing, I like to see fish. So for me, blind casting is not an option. I don't do it. So I have to see the fish. So that's all a part of what I really, really love. And then, like I say, it's always exciting, just no matter what species, just to, like steelhead. I've been an avid, spay caster, steelhead fisher for 30 years now, and I mean that tug, that would be considered maybe blind casting. you're picking apart, you know a fish is there. So that's the only kind of blind casting I do.
I think everybody who fishes can relate to, say, watching a rooster fish hit a topwater plug, or watching a Jack Crevalle, hit a topwater, or hit a
or a bass attack,
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
So
a popping bug, or
the whole
absolutely.
idea of seeing the strike, of seeing a fish and casting to it, I think everybody does get the excitement of that. The one thing that we used to do in West Palm as beginner fly fishermen was blind casting for bonito, for little tuning. And because they're so ravenous, and it's still an exciting strike, even if you're
you get it
a sinking fly, you still see you still see some white water if it's a foot or so below the surface, because the fish goes crazy. But we even broke 9 weights on some of those fish, and they're not that big, they're 10, 12 pounds, but
they're very, very strong fish.
they're very strong. But something like that, or something like finding pods of Spanish mackerel, or pods of Jack Crevalle, kind of help you get interested and involved. And I don't know what the equivalent really is in freshwater of that. Is there an equivalent of that?
Well, one thing you've learned is you've learned how to fight a fish, for example. So that's a really important part that goes, it doesn't get discussed a lot. But in the saltwater, it becomes very, very important. And now as we're talking about conservation, it becomes important too. But your experiences, how much pound pressure you need to put, how to do that. And that is something that fly fishing people probably need to pay a little bit more attention to, because it's important.
Yeah. and I'll add to your point too, Chris. And you made me think of river bassing is a favorite of mine, because and I always start out with a popping bug, because if usually that's how you find of any fish, and even a bluegill or a redbreast or something else is just as much fun on the top water. But river bass are stronger because they're used to fighting a current versus a lake or a pond. But we have so many, we're fortunate in Georgia, we have so many species of river bass, and that is just my favorite. Now the rain and finding clear water can be the problem up here as well. But even in Florida, the Santa Fe River, Swanee bass, all of it, river bass are just a lot of fun, and they can take you through that top water bite and the pot using.
Well, that's a different species. So there's largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, river bass.
River. No, I'm talking about bass, like the Swanee bass, Santa Fe bass, largemouth bass, smallmouth. I'm talking about bass, and I'm using that expression, river bass, but bass that live in rivers.
Okay, got it.
Lakes.
Okay,
and
right.
It's often the same species, like largemouth, that are in ponds, and you have all these lakes with the competitions. But you also find, and I have a story in Florida Sportsman, huge largemouth bass in the Santa Fe River. I mean, they were 10 pounds plus in this moving water.
Oh, what a blast.
And they put up a stronger fight, like smallmouth are known to do, just because they live in a situation
like that smallmouth in the John Day in Oregon.
Yeah.
So that would be somewhat equivalent to saying, okay, if you want to get your first fish on fly and it's in freshwater, go try for river bass. That would be more. Yeah,
and I wouldn't even say, or I would say go to a pond, a backyard pond, and catch a bluegill. I mean, those are to anybody. That never gets old. Fly fishing, catching a bluegill, and never a panfish.
So one time, Polly, I was a speaker in St. Louis. This is years ago, and then after I did my presentation to a fly fishing club, and everybody, all the guys are lined up and they want to talk to you and everything. And so this guy comes up and he opens up his wallet. I think he's going to show me his family photos or something. He shows me a picture of a bluegill. And he's like, have you ever seen such a beautiful thing? And I mean, like, it was just priceless. I mean, that, and
it is.
Just lost Dave Whitlock, and Dave Whitlock was absolutely Renaissance man. And I think that was one of his favorite fish to catch. It's a bluegill. Yeah.
Well, I will tell you that I published a picture of me with a shoal bass I caught on fly, one shoal bass.
Yeah.
I caught on fly. I published that on Facebook, believe it or not. I was proud of it. I was very
Oh,
proud.
yeah.
See,
They're my favorite river or bass species. Yeah. Because the Flint River. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Well, that's so cool, though. I never really heard of river bass. That's a great thing I just learned.
Well, it's
As a way of explaining, talking about what you
Yeah.
like, because that's your local way of talking about it. Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Well, is that the specific type of fly fishing that you prefer to do is river fishing, or do you have a favorite location to go?
I will say if I'm fishing in fresh water, I like moving water. So that could be trout. That's why bass that live in rivers, and that's usually warm water conditions. Now, rainfall can mess up a river for 2 weeks in Georgia. You know that. So planning ahead to go bass fishing in the river is hard to do, or club trips are even hard to plan because the river can be blown out easily.
Yeah. Any particular location you like best for freshwater, and then your favorite for saltwater?
I live in Athens, so I've kind of discovered a new place on the Savannah River called Anthony Shoals. It's an hour away, but it's the same. Well, it's a broad river. I'm sorry. The Savannah River in Augusta I love too, because it's just wide open shoals. It's beautiful, and you can just wade around from rock to rock, and I mean any situation there. And there's a lot of shoals like that in Georgia. That is a lot of fun to me, and it's just beautiful. You can sit on the rock and have lunch, or you can fish, take your dog, and he can hop around on the rock to rock. So that's a good situation.
All right, Lorianne, what type of fly fishing do you prefer, and what location?
Well, now I want to go check out her fishing, and my friend Henry Cowan's always been, why aren't you coming and checking it out? And I'm like, okay, why aren't I checking it out? But we have our seasons to get into, and so. My life now is I'm in Montana in the summertime, and then I live here in Belize, from October to June. And I have, I live on Ambergris Key. I have bonefish, permanent tarpon out there, right there. I really appreciate the fishery here, and I appreciate the community of guides that I've been able to work with and live with here, and how they've accepted me in their community. Fishing, I think what happens is, it's all fun. Fly fishing is just all fun. And then wherever you can be your locale, make it happen. For me, my obsession with the salt became so huge, I ended up moving here. So obviously, beware, beware when you get into fly fishing and what it can do to your life. And, derailed several women I know, it's like, just, yay,
But in a good way.
In a good way.
Yeah. Well, what kind of gear do you suggest women start with? Obviously, if it's freshwater might be one thing, but in saltwater might be another. But what are your recommendations, Polly?
When you buy in fly fishing gear, you don't have to get the most expensive brand. You can buy an affordable brand, but I also warn against getting the cheapest brand, because that could discourage you or that could frustrate you. So I think just to walk into a fly shop and ask, there are brands that are kind of middle of the road. You don't have to spend $800 on a rod. You can spend $200, $150 and get a good quality. The main thing is to not get the cheapest, because if you could be totally frustrated and then never want to pick up the fly rod again after that.
Yeah. So you want to look at, for whatever type of fly fishing you're doing, a rod and reel and line at the very least for your first purchases. Although obviously, if you go to a club or you go to a clinic and you start to use gear that belongs to other people, and then you can get some advice and that type of thing too. Lorianne, you have any additional thoughts on that?
So, if you're gonna be, I'm gonna go river bassin, or if you're gonna be out west, you're gonna probably have a 5-weight or a 6-weight. And if you have a lot of bush in the west, we have big rivers. So we like a 9-foot rod for a 5 or 6-weight. Can cover most things. You can take that and you can go back east, and then but sometimes it goes to 8.5. I mean, what do you like, Polly? Do you like an 8.5 or do you like a 9?
I like the 8.5 or the 9-foot rod for the first
Okay.
rod. And I
So,
don't.
and this is something that's so versatile. You could take between bass fishing and trout fishing. And then let's say you get into salmon or steelhead or bonefish, and then you would have an 8-weight rod. And the only difference would be that in the saltwater, it's tropic, it's hot. So it takes that cold line. So you have freshwater lines coating on the fly line, and then you have saltwater coating on the saltwater fly line. So that's the only difference. The rod itself is you could take here, there, wherever. If it's in the salt, you just rinse it at the end of every day in fresh water, make sure it doesn't get rusted. So that's kind of the beauty of the thing. And then, I think it's really nice to have at least, if you're going to get into it, have a good 5-6 weight. And so it's right there by the door. You could just go practice for 15 minutes. And how many times have we all gone and embarrassed ourselves out in the park? But you also meet new friends.
Yeah.
When you're casting, and they're like, "What in the world are you doing?" And so it's really fun to do that. But having ownership, even though, like, let's say you come here, we provide anything you need, just sort of show up. But I just had 2 guys at a bonefish school, and I said, please bring your rods. And they enjoyed using their own equipment. And then they became very familiar with it. Somebody also might say, here, this is the best rod in the whole world, and it might not work for you. And in our schools, we'll take 20 women, and everybody will lay down their rod, and then everybody will cast a different rod. Wow, I love this one, or this is a dogger, or, and so, but having equipment, and as a nurse, I'm head to toe. You really need to have good hats, sunglasses. You really need great polarized sunglasses. Absolutely. Yeah, see the fish.
That's true.
You have gray lenses, you're not going to see what's going on.
Right.
The tip you mentioned about going to the park and stuff, I've done that in clinics and such, and I've thought about doing it here locally because, my driveway is not quite long enough, I don't think, and I've got a little bit of clearance issue with trees. So do you recommend putting a fly on the end of a leader, on the end of the fly line, cutting off the hook, or do you?
I'm not a real purist about that. I don't know how you feel about it, Polly, but but I do like to make sure you have you need to have a full, like, 9-foot leader, so you don't have just like a stubby thing going blah blah blah. And then we tie a little piece of yarn on the end, or you could break
a piece of yarn.
A little piece of yarn, but really
see where your fly lands.
Just getting out there, and you don't have to worry about it too much, but it is nice to have that piece of yarn for accuracy. Joe Wolf will thank me for saying that. Target. So otherwise you don't know where it went.
You put a big
That's what we do it at Camp Sunshine with kids. With kids at Camp Sunshine every summer, I help out with that. We use a bright colored piece of yarn, and they're, casting into a hula hoop or something, or just, but it's seeing your fly. There's no hooks or anything flying around, but it's just seeing where you're putting your fly and where it lands.
Well, and I know too that there are some resources, including on theflysouth.com, which is Polly's website. You can read stories about fly fishing. You can
great stories.
Yeah.
Stories.
Yeah. There are books by Lefty Kreh, as you mentioned. I don't know if Flip Palette has done a book, right? I think our company actually published it, but
he's done several.
He has. Yeah.
Is it possible to literally find a woman fly fishing instructor?
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And United on the Fly, I think they cataloged. You have to keep up to date every year on it, and it was something I always dreamed of doing, and I think they did it. And so you could just type in, United Women on the Fly, type in your state, find women guides, find women clubs. Really, really, so many resources now. Shoo.
Right.
Joe Wolf did an interview with CBS. I think it was a year or two ago. It was so great because she was her classic self, because she said to the guy, she said, well, if I knew how hard you were to teach, I wouldn't have done this.
I've never met her.
Such a classic joking. But she, to address women in fly fishing, she said, we've done it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
just the seeds that it's happened. It's expanding.
Yeah.
It's growing. The forest is growing. It's amazing. It's women are teaching other women all the time, and it's so much fun.
Yeah.
In my lifetime, to see what's happened is really
And
phenomenal.
honestly, the physical strength makes no difference. I don't know if in
Yeah.
the sport.
You
So
just have to want to go.
exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Just the desire is the key. So,
Yes.
so is there anything else that we haven't discussed that y'all want to talk about?
I think you can tell it's a very infectious sport, and the sporting life, I think, for women is such a fabulous way to live, and we're blessed with that. And we hold hands.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, to any woman, and you probably, or anybody, you just have fun. I mean, there is not I say there's not a wrong or a right way. Learning to tie knots was a little bit hard for me, but it was like, oh, don't worry about it. I don't know. You worry about it when in saltwater. I know in certain situations, but don't stress over the little things. Just enjoy it. Have fun.
I have to say, when I teach, probably the most common thing I say is breathe.
Yeah.
Because everybody stops. They forget to breathe.
Yeah, I would need to be reminded. That's true.
Yeah.
I have one little tip, and this is pretty minor, but it's a tip for women getting into fly fishing. Is I always keep, whether you wet weight or you use waders, I have 2 sizes of wading boots. There are 2 shoe sizes different. I have a size 10, a size 8. One size. Don't buy your boots too small. There's nothing worse than being in cold water, your toes cramping up and freezing. Have plenty of room in your wading boots. Don't worry about it. And I keep the larger size when I wear.
I completely agree. And I hadn't had my wading boots on because I've been living here in Belize, and I had to put them on in Montana. I lost my big toe because, I was guiding up and down the river, and I was in pure pain, but my was too small. And then I was just like, I just can't believe it. And then, I think that's such a great tip.
I mean, because when we're speaking to women, we're a little vain about our shoe size and so forth. So just don't buy your boots too small. Have plenty of room.
Plenty of room.
Yeah.
That is a good take home message there. I also wanted, and I don't know if y'all know Jen Ripple, but she also publishes Done Magazine, which is a fly fishing publication too. So that's another source.
Fabulous source. Jen's a great source.
I've just met her. She's great.
Really, she's great. She's come down here to Belize, and actually she covered me as a guide in her first issue. So, she's super cool. Fabulous resource right there. Thank you for mentioning that.
Okay.
Well, thank y'all. I mean, I feel like I've learned a lot. I've got some leads and tips on some things to do. And I'm feeling a little bit more energized about going ahead and just going out to the park and getting some casting practice in. And maybe then I'll come see you, Polly, in Blue Ridge, and I'll go see you in Belize.
There you go.
Absolutely. Yep. Take care,
Thank y'all
Chris.
so much.
Have a good day, you guys.
All right.
You too.
Tight lines.
You.
All right.